I had been through dozens of architecture interviews, but never one on a beach at sunrise. Barefoot on quiet sand, I stood across from a female CEO who chose the ocean over a boardroom. Zoe Martinez sat cross-legged near the shoreline, laptop balanced on her knees, asking me to draw directly in the sand and show her how I saw the land. Not as something to conquer, but something to work in harmony with. When the sun finally rose above the horizon, I realized two unsettling truths. I wanted this job more than any opportunity one had ever pursued. And this strange meeting was already beginning to change my life. The coffee always came at 6:15. I had perfected the ritual over the past year since the breakup, measuring the grounds with precision, listening for the familiar gurgle of the machine, pouring exactly 8 ounces into the same navy blue mug. Everything had its place, its time, its predictable rhythm. The shirts hung pressed in my closet, sorted by color. The bills sat in neat stacks on my desk, paid 2 days before they were due. Even the crack in the kitchen tile near the refrigerator had become a kind of comfort, a familiar imperfection in an otherwise orderly world. I had built this life deliberately, brick by careful brick. After Jessica left a year ago, my ex-girlfriend had walked out with words that still echoed in quiet moments. Words about how I had become boring, how the man she had fallen for had disappeared into spreadsheets and safety nets, how she could not breathe anymore in our too careful life. So I had taken her criticism and turned it into armor. If boring meant stability, if predictable meant security, then I would be the most boring, predictable guy in California. My small home office held evidence of this philosophy. Neat rows of architectural drawings for modest renovations and safe residential projects. Nothing risky, nothing that could fail spectacularly and leave me scrambling. But tucked in the bottom drawer of my desk, hidden beneath tax returns and old contracts, sat a portfolio of different work. Designs from before when I dreamed bigger. An eco-resort built into a cliffside. A community center that looked like it was growing out of the earth itself. Buildings that took chances, that pushed boundaries, that made people stop and stare. I rarely looked at those drawings anymore. They belonged to someone else. Someone who had the luxury of risk before he learned that playing it safe hurt less than spectacular failure. The email arrived at 11:13 on a Tuesday night. I had been reviewing plans for a kitchen remodel, the kind of straightforward project that paid bills and required no imagination. The subject line made me blink twice. Interview tomorrow. Sunrise Beach. Dress code, whatever makes you comfortable. I read it 3 times, certain I had misunderstood. Zoe Martinez, CEO of Greenwave Properties, a startup supposedly revolutionizing sustainable real estate development. They were looking for a lead architect. The position would involve, according to the brief description, creating resort properties that did not just coexist with nature, but enhanced it. It was everything I used to dream about. The interview location and time, however, suggested the CEO might be slightly unhinged. 7 in the morning on a public beach. No office, no conference room, just sand and ocean and apparently whatever I felt comfortable wearing. I stood in my bedroom, staring at the pressed white shirt hanging ready for tomorrow, and felt something unfamiliar stir in my chest. Possibility. Felt dangerous. I should decline politely, stick to the kitchen remodel, keep my world small and manageable. But my hand was already typing a response before my careful brain could stop it. I'll be there. Thank you for the opportunity. I hit send before I could reconsider, then spent the next 30 minutes wondering if I had just made a massive mistake. Morning came with its usual precision, but I felt off balance. I changed shirts 3 times, uncertain what whatever makes you comfortable meant for a beach interview. The white button-up felt too formal. The polo seemed too casual. I finally settled on a blue Oxford, rolled the sleeves halfway, and told myself it was fine. The beach parking lot was nearly empty at 6:45. I grabbed my leather portfolio, feeling immediately ridiculous. Who brought a portfolio to a beach? But I was here now, so I walked across the sand, expensive shoes sinking with each step, until I saw her. Zoe Martinez stood near the water's edge, and my carefully prepared interview composure evaporated instantly. She wore black running shorts and a fitted tank top, her dark hair pulled back in a high ponytail. Her figure was athletic, confident, the kind of presence that made people turn and look. Not just because she was beautiful, but because she seemed to occupy space differently than everyone else, as if she had made some private agreement with gravity to work on her terms. She had a laptop perched on a driftwood log and a yoga mat spread out on the sand. And she was stretching casually, as if this were the most normal office in the world. "Ethan Brooks!" she called out when she noticed me approaching. Her smile was warm but also amused, her eyes taking in my button-up shirt and leather shoes with obvious entertainment. "You wore business casual to the beach. That's adorable." I felt my face heat. I wasn't sure what the dress code actually meant. Zoe laughed, a genuine sound that somehow made me relax despite my embarrassment. "It means I don't do traditional interviews. I want to see how people think when they're not stuck in a conference room trying to impress me with rehearsed answers. Come on, sit. Don't worry about the sand. It'll wash out." She patted the ground next to her mat, and I carefully lowered myself onto the beach, portfolio still clutched protectively. The morning sun was climbing higher, painting the ocean in shades of gold and amber. Zoe pulled up images on her laptop, satellite views of a stretch of coastline about 40 miles south. "This is what I bought last year," she said, and her voice shifted, became softer, more personal. 12 acres of protected coastline. Previous owner wanted to bulldoze it for a standard resort, maximum rooms, minimum character. I have a different vision. She turned the laptop toward me, but instead of showing me plans, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "What would you do with this? If money and regulations weren't obstacles, if you could design something that honored this place instead of dominating it, what would you build?" I opened my portfolio automatically, ready to show her the safe residential work, the approved plans, the evidence that I was reliable and professional. But Zoe shook her head. "I don't want to see what you've already done for other people. I want to see what you'd do if you weren't afraid." The words hit me like cold water. She could not possibly know about the hidden portfolio, about the dreams I had boxed up. But her eyes were steady, challenging, and I found myself setting aside the leather case and reaching instead for a piece of driftwood. I began sketching in the sand. Rough lines at first, then more confident strokes. A resort that followed the natural curve of the land. Buildings that stepped back from the cliff edge, creating terraces that doubled as gardens. Common areas open to the sky. Private spaces that felt like tree houses. I talked as I drew, explaining how you could use the existing vegetation for natural cooling, how the orientation could maximize sunrise and sunset views without destroying habitat, how the whole place could run on solar and reclaimed water. Zoe leaned closer to watch, and I became acutely aware of her proximity. I could smell something subtle, maybe coconut sunscreen or sea salt, could hear her breathing change as she followed my explanation. When I finally stopped, my hands covered in sand, I looked up to find her staring at me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "That," she said quietly, "is exactly what I've been trying to find. Not just a competent architect, someone who actually sees what I see." She stood abruptly, brushing sand from her legs, and I scrambled to my feet. "You're hired," Zoe announced. "But I have one condition." My mind went blank. "Wait, that's it? You haven't even seen my portfolio, checked my references, asked about my experience with commercial projects." Zoe picked up her laptop, rolled up her yoga mat, and fixed me with a look that was both serious and playful. "I just watched you design with passion in the sand. That tells me more than any portfolio. My condition is this: I need someone who can think outside the box. Someone willing to take risks. Someone who won't give me safe, mediocre designs because they're too afraid to try something brilliant. Can you be that person?" The question hung in the salt air between us. I thought about my carefully controlled life, about Jessica's criticism and never taking chances that might fail. I thought about the hidden portfolio and the man I used to be. Zoe was watching me, waiting, and I realized she was not just offering me a job. She was offering me a choice about who I wanted to be. "I just got out of a relationship," I heard myself say. "She left because I became too cautious. I'm not sure I know how to be bold anymore." Zoe's expression softened. "I'm not asking you to be reckless. I'm asking you to succeed bigger than you've let yourself imagine. Think about it. I need an answer by tomorrow morning. She handed me a business card with just her name and a phone number. Text me. And Ethan? She smiled again, that same warm, amused smile. Next time, wear shorts to the beach. Then she walked away, and I stood alone with sand on my hands and my entire worldview turned sideways. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone. Jessica's last text was still in my messages from 2 months ago. You're not the person I fell in love with anymore. You're just going through motions. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been going through motions for the past year, playing it safe to avoid getting hurt again. But Zoe was offering me a chance to be someone different. Someone who took risks. Someone who designed with passion instead of fear. I picked up my phone before I could overthink it and sent a text to Zoe's number. I'm in. When do we start? The response came back within 30 seconds. Tomorrow. My place. 8 a.m. Bring your hidden portfolio. I want to see everything. I stared at that last sentence. How did she know about the hidden portfolio? Then I smiled. Of course she had done her research. Zoe Martinez did not seem like someone who did anything halfway. And that realization thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. Zoe's penthouse was not what I expected. I had imagined cold, modern minimalism, the kind of sterile space that said success but not warmth. Instead, the apartment was filled with light, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, comfortable furniture in soft colors, and everywhere evidence of a life fully lived. Surfboards leaned in one corner. Books were stacked on every surface. Plants thrived in ceramic pots. The kitchen was clearly well used, not a showpiece. Zoe answered the door in jeans and a loose sweater, barefoot, looking more like she was ready for a weekend with friends than a business meeting. Come in, she said. Coffee? Please. I followed her into the kitchen, watching as she moved with easy confidence, pulling out mugs and pouring from a French press. So, she said, handing me a mug, tell me about the portfolio you keep hidden. I set down my bag and pulled out my phone, opening the Photos app and scrolling back years until I found what I was looking for. Images of my old work, the hidden designs. I turned the screen toward her. These are what I used to design before I decided safe was more important than brilliant. Zoe took the phone, her eyes widening as she swiped through image after image. When she looked back at me, her expression had changed entirely. This, she said, voice thick with emotion. This is what my father would have designed. This is exactly what I need. She handed back my phone and our fingers brushed. The contact was brief but electric, and we both felt it. Your father? I asked. Zoe moved to the windows, looking out at the ocean. He was an architect. He spent his whole life dreaming about building an eco-resort on protected land. He never got to do it because he always put other people's projects first. Always waited for the right time. When he died 2 years ago, I realized the right time never comes. You have to make it. She turned back to face me. So I sold everything I had, bought that land, and decided to build his dream. But I can't do it alone, and I can't do it with someone who's just going to give me pretty but predictable buildings. The vulnerability in her admission shifted something between us. We were not just CEO and architect anymore. We were two people carrying different kinds of fear, trying to figure out if we could build something meaningful together. I understand, I said quietly. My ex left because I stopped taking risks. She said I disappeared into spreadsheets and safety nets. Maybe she was right. Or maybe, Zoe said softly, you were protecting yourself from getting hurt. There's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, you have to decide if staying safe is worth staying stuck. I looked at her standing there, backlit by ocean light, and felt something shift inside me. Okay, I'll do it. I'll design with passion instead of fear. I'll take risks. I'll build your father's dream. Zoe smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. Our dream. If we're doing this, we're doing it together. The days that followed developed their own rhythm, completely different from my old, careful patterns, but surprisingly comfortable. Zoe did not believe in working in one place. Some mornings we met at her penthouse. Other days she would text me an address, a coffee shop or a park bench, or once a rooftop downtown where we sketched while pigeons pecked around our feet. She thought out loud, questioned her own assumptions, sketched on napkins, then crumpled them up when better ideas struck. It was chaotic and energizing and completely unlike the methodical process I was used to. Slowly, carefully, I began to let myself design bigger again. The preliminary sketches gave way to bold concepts. Safe materials lists expanded to include innovative, sustainable options I had never tried. The resort began to take shape as something truly special. And with each iteration, I felt pieces of myself returning that I thought were lost forever. But the professional collaboration was becoming complicated by something neither of us acknowledged directly. Zoe would stand close to review my work, and I would lose track of what I was saying. I would catch myself watching her move around the room, noting the grace in her gestures, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. There were moments when our eyes would meet and hold for a beat too long, when casual touches lasted an extra second. After a particularly productive session where we had finally nailed the main building's design, Zoe suggested we celebrate with takeout and wine on her balcony. It was evening, the ocean turning purple and gold with sunset. The setting was romantic, even if neither of us said so. We talked about the project at first, but then the conversation drifted to more personal territory. "Tell me about your ex," Zoe said. "What happened?" I sipped my wine, watching the last light fade from the sky. I think I lost myself trying to be what she needed. Jessica wanted adventure and spontaneity, and I wanted stability and plans. After we moved in together, I doubled down on the stability part. She said I became someone she didn't recognize. Maybe she was right. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. What if you weren't wrong or right? What if you were just trying to build something solid, and she was trying to hold on to who she was before everything changed? I looked at her, surprised by the generous interpretation. "You're saying we were both right and both wrong?" "I think most relationship failures are like that," Zoe said. "Not villains and heroes, just people who needed different things." She paused, then added softly, "For what it's worth, I think the version of you trying to build something solid is pretty impressive. But I also think he doesn't have to disappear completely for you to take some risks again." The conversation shifted to Zoe's story. She talked about her father, about growing up watching him sketch buildings during family vacations, about how he would light up when describing his dream resort, but always found reasons to delay it. "He was going to do it after he retired," Zoe said, her voice catching slightly. "He had all these detailed plans. Then he had a heart attack at 58 and all those plans died with him. I found them in his office afterward, years of drawings and notes. It broke my heart that he never took the chance." She looked at me directly. "That's why I push you to be bold. Not because I think safe is wrong, but because I watched someone run out of time before they did the thing they were meant to do. I don't want that to happen to you. Or to me." The honesty was disarming. I reached across the small table between them and took her hand. "Thank you for telling me that. And for seeing something in me I'd forgotten was there." Our hands stayed linked as the evening deepened into night. We talked about other things, lighter topics, shared laughs about failed projects and embarrassing moments. But underneath the casual conversation ran a current of something stronger, something we were both aware of but not quite ready to name. When I finally left after midnight, Zoe walked me to the door. We stood in the doorway too long, the goodbye stretching out. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Yeah," I replied, not moving. We looked at each other, and the tension was palpable. Zoe stepped closer, just slightly, and my breath caught. But then my phone buzzed. A text from my buddy asking about drinks this weekend, and the moment broke. "Good night, Zoe." "Good night," she echoed, and I could hear the same frustration and longing I felt reflected in those two words. The professional work continued to progress brilliantly. The resort design was coming together as something remarkable, and Zoe secured a major investor meeting to present our vision. But the personal tension between us was building to an unsustainable level. We found excuses to touch, to stand close, to extend working sessions longer than necessary. The investor meeting was scheduled for a Friday, and Zoe was stressed in a way I had not seen before. The night before the presentation, she called me at 10 p.m., voice tight with anxiety. "Can you come over? I need to run through this one more time." I drove to her penthouse and found her pacing, hair in a messy bun, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, surrounded by printouts and tablet screens showing our designs. She looked younger, more vulnerable than her usual confident self. "What if they hate it?" she asked before I had even taken off my jacket. "What if I've been pushing us towards something too risky and we crash and burn, and I've wasted your time and my father's dream and everything?" I set down my things and took her gently by the shoulders. "Zoe, look at me." She did, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "This design is extraordinary. It's exactly what you envisioned. If they don't see that, they're the wrong investors. But they will see it, because it's impossible not to." She shook her head. "You don't understand the pressure. This is my last chance. I put everything into buying that land. If this fails, I lose it all." The confession changed everything. I had thought Zoe was fearless, that she did not understand the weight of risk because she had always had a safety net. But she did not. She was betting everything on this dream, just like I was betting my creative renewal on her faith in me. "Then we make sure it doesn't fail," I said firmly. "We go in there tomorrow and we show them something they've never seen before. Something so clear and compelling they'd be idiots to pass it up." I released her shoulders and moved to the coffee table, starting to reorganize the presentation materials. Zoe watched for a moment, then joined me, and we worked side by side until past 2 in the morning, refining every detail until it gleamed. At some point during those early morning hours, exhaustion and proximity and accumulated tension finally broke through our careful boundaries. Zoe reached for the same mock-up I was grabbing, our hands colliding, and neither pulled away. We looked at each other, really looked, and the question that had been hovering unasked for weeks finally surfaced. "This is complicated," Zoe whispered. "Very," I agreed. "I don't do complicated well." "Neither do I admitted. "But maybe that's exactly why we should try." I leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back, but she did not. She met me halfway, and when our lips touched, it felt like something clicking into place that had been misaligned for a long time. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as weeks of restrained attraction found release. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, Zoe rested her forehead against mine. "What do we do now?" she asked. I laughed quietly. "I have absolutely no idea. But I know I don't want to pretend this isn't happening." Zoe pulled back enough to see my face. "What if this doesn't work? What if we're risking everything, the project, our working relationship, everything?" The question sobered us both. I thought carefully before answering. Jessica left because I was too afraid to take chances. If I let fear stop me from this, from you, then I'm proving she was right. I'd rather risk everything and fail than never try at all. We did not sleep that night, but not for the reasons I had imagined hours before. Instead, we talked until dawn. Honest conversations about fears and hopes and what trying meant. We agreed to take it slow, to be honest about our feelings, to keep working together even if the personal relationship complicated things. By the time the sun rose, we felt exhausted but settled. The investor presentation was at 10 a.m. I went home to shower and change, then met Zoe at the meeting location at 9:30. She wore a professional dress and heels, her confidence restored. But when she saw me, she smiled in a way that was just for me. "Ready to do this?" she asked. "Together." I took her hand briefly, squeezed it, then released it. Together. The presentation went flawlessly. Zoe was brilliant, passionate, articulate. I supported her explanations with technical details and responded to questions with confidence I had not felt in years. The designs spoke for themselves, images of a resort that looked like it belonged to the landscape rather than imposed upon it. When we finished, the investors exchanged looks, and the lead investor smiled widely. "This is exactly what the market needs right now. Luxury that doesn't destroy what makes the location special. We're in." Zoe's hand found mine under the table, and we held on tight while maintaining professional expressions. The meeting wrapped up with handshakes and promises to begin contract negotiations immediately. As soon as we were alone in the elevator heading down, Zoe let out a sound between a laugh and a sob and threw her arms around my neck. I caught her, spun her slightly, both of us grinning like idiots. "We did it," she breathed against my shoulder. "You did it," I corrected. "I just drew what you already saw." Zoe pulled back, keeping her arms around my neck. "We did it together. That's how this works now." The weeks and months that followed were an adjustment. Zoe and I navigated the complexity of being professional partners and beginning a personal relationship. There were stumbles. I sometimes retreated into old habits of caution when Zoe pushed for bold choices. Zoe sometimes forgot that I needed advance notice for evening plans and would suggest spontaneous late-night meetings. We learned to communicate better, to express needs instead of expecting mind-reading, to compromise without either feeling diminished. The resort construction began 6 months after that first investor meeting. Zoe and I stood at the site together on the first day, watching bulldozers carefully clear only what was necessary, preserving every tree they could, working around the natural contours. I looked at Zoe and saw my own contentment reflected back. This was not the life I had planned. It was riskier, more complicated, less controlled. It was also richer, fuller, more alive than anything I had built in my years of playing safe. Zoe caught me staring. "What?" I just shook my head. "Nothing. Everything. Thank you." A year later, the resort was nearly complete. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in late spring. Perfect weather, the landscape in full bloom. Press and investors and community members were invited. Zoe and I stood together near the main building, watching guests arrive and explore. The design had translated perfectly from paper to reality, exactly what we had envisioned. Zoe leaned against my shoulder, tired but triumphant. "We actually did it." "You doubted," I teased gently. She laughed. "Not the resort. I doubted we could make both work, the professional and personal." It seemed like too much to ask for. I wrapped an arm around her waist. "And now," she tilted her face up to kiss me softly. "Now I can't imagine one without the other." As the celebration continued around us, we slipped away to the beach where I had first interviewed, the place where everything had started. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. We sat down on the sand, and after a comfortable silence, I said, "Remember when you asked if I could take risks?" Zoe nodded. "I remember you looked terrified." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I have one more risk I want to take." Zoe's eyes went wide. "Ethan." I opened the box, revealing a ring with a simple band and a stone that caught the sunset light. "I know it's only been a year. I know this is fast. But I also know I want every morning to start with you. Even when you burn the pancakes." Zoe laughed through sudden tears. "I'm getting better at pancakes." "Marginally," I agreed, grinning. "Say yes anyway." Zoe's tears spilled over properly now. She cupped my face with both hands. "Yes, obviously yes. How could I say anything else?" I slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. We kissed as several guests who had wandered down to the beach started clapping. The private moment became public, but neither of us minded. This was our place where we had started, and it felt right to begin the next chapter here too. The wedding happened 6 months later, small and intimate, on the resort grounds we had built together. Zoe wore a simple dress and walked barefoot through the grass. I cried when I saw her, not caring who noticed. We wrote our own vows, promising to take risks together and build both dreams and safety, to balance each other's extremes, to always remember that the best things in life require both courage and care. After the ceremony, after the dinner and the toasts and the dancing, the two of us walked down to the beach one more time. The sky was full of stars, the ocean a dark whisper. We talked quietly about our future, about the projects we would design together, about maybe starting a family, about growing old and still working side by side. "Do you ever regret it?" Zoe asked suddenly. "That morning I made you interview on the beach. If you'd said no, your life would have stayed simple." I considered the question seriously. My life was never simple. It was small. There's a difference. Simple can be good. Small just means you're hiding. I looked at my wife, still getting used to that word. I don't regret a single scary decision since that morning. Every risk has been worth it. Zoe kissed me softly. Even the burned pancakes? I laughed. Especially the burned pancakes. They remind me that perfection isn't the goal. Living fully is. We sat in comfortable silence, watching stars reflect on water. And I thought about how much had changed since that first email at 11:13 on a Tuesday night. I thought I was applying for a job. I found a whole new life instead. Years later, when people asked how we met, Zoe and I would smile at each other. She invited me to the world's strangest job interview, I would say. He showed up in dress shoes on a beach, Zoe would add, and we would both laugh, because the story of how we got from that first morning to this full life was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Every morning still started the same way, coffee at 6:15. But now there were 2 mugs side by side. Zoe still could not cook without supervision, and we laughed about it constantly. I still made careful plans, but I had learned to leave room for spontaneity. We built more resorts together, each one pushing boundaries a little further, each one reflecting our shared vision of beauty that did not dominate nature but partnered with it. The coffee still came at 6:15. The morning still started the same way. But my life was no longer about safety and predictability. It was about taking chances, building dreams, and loving fearlessly. And every morning when I saw Zoe smile across the kitchen table, I knew that the best risk I ever took was saying yes to an interview on the beach with a CEO who taught me that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is play it safe.